Welcome to the MIT Architecture Alumni Summer Lecture Event. Teaching Architecture in Venezuela with Jose Frontado. My name is Emily Huang. I'm the Vice President of M.Arch.AS for membership, where our mission is to provide a forum to connect MIT architecture graduates throughout the years and spanning the world to each other and to MIT. Our collective experiences to and from MIT, our merits and our values bind us all. So in that spirit, I invite you to become a member of M.Arch.AS if you are a Course 4 graduate and have not joined us. Our membership is free. But if you can't support us, we ask you to join as a paying member so that we can sponsor more programs like the one you're about to enjoy. Please go to MITARCHA.org to connect with us and become a member. We welcome you all. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing MIT Master of Architecture 1980 alumnus, Jose Guillermo Frontado, architecture professor and practicing architect in Caracas, Venezuela. Jose is also one of our 5 new members who has joined the M.Arch.AS Board of Directors. In addition to his distinguished career, Jose strives to be a wonderful person. He is proud of his 45-year marriage, his 2 children, his 3 grandchildren, and a 4th one on the way. We're so excited to have him share his story with us today. Without further ado, Professor Frontado, please take it away.
Okay, well, thanks, Emily, for the presentation. Thanks, everyone, for coming into the talk. And thanks MIT, M.Arch.AS, M.Arch.AS for letting me doing this talk. And special thanks to Mina, Marifat, and Olivia who convinced me of doing that. They talked to me why was I interested in belonging to the course of M.Arch.AS. What I told him at the moment is that those of us who keep on teaching in Venezuela, just are fully convinced that what we have to do is to look for links, not only from our own Venezuelans who are living abroad, but from every institution, every university that we can connect with and try to learn from them and try to make use of those connections and that experience. Also the talk, I want to thank first this young fellow who just graduated recently, Cesar Barbaran, who did this presentation, this beautiful presentation. Thanks to Franco Ricucci and Alice Mena. Franco is like the academic, the administrative head of the school, and Alice the academic dean for joining me in this endeavor. And also, just I want you to take this small talk, like the first part of celebrating 50 years of the foundation of the operation of the architecture career at the Universidad Simon Bolivar. We started in 1971. And why I give this talk is just it's a personal story. As Perez Reverte once wrote, I don't write the history of Spain, I write a history of Spain, my history. So this is my history of 50 years going up to Sartenejas, first as a student, then as a teacher, in and out. And also, I want to apologize to some of my colleagues who are teaching some other areas. This is a talk from a design studio professor, so there will be a bias and perhaps more detail about what we did at the design studios and some other courses. So let's start then. I subdivided, let me, this is the part I get mixed up, you know, I'll share a screen, etc. So bear with me. Okay. And okay. Well, my post, M.Arch.AS, MIT Club of Washington, MIT Club of Venezuela, to which I belong, of course, the University Simon Bolivar. The last ones are the students union of the student group of the university. How organize the talk? I think we have 4 periods. I just wanted to see which were the specific moments in times where there was a big change. First chapter called at birth, which became before the university was founded, 1950 to 1980. Then growing up, then chapter which is painful for all of us, and then the revolution came. Last chapter, which is a very short one, which is 50 years. And what do we do? So let's go to the first chapter and also on what I, oops. I think I froze. Okay. Why I begin in 1950? It's 1950. It's a moment when what we call modernity comes full-fledged into the country. It begins with 1950 dictatorship, and then in 1958 we have a new democracy coming into very Jimenez-Leafy country, and in a continent of military regimes and unstable democracies and socialist revolutions, we enter this end of 1950s, beginning of 1960s, with a very high economic rate of growth. We were actually, it was a prosperous government. There was a huge economic boom. There was a huge stream of infrastructure of all type, and but same time, that economic boom, that economic huge development did not translate it into let's say prosperity for all. We were still an unequal society, and so that it's going to take a toll later. We had a policy of open borders during those years, which also started creating a negative impact on our infrastructure and services. And we have tremendous US influence on our daily life, economic life, politics, and the development of our oil industry. And in this context of what was going on, the Soviet invasion of Prague, the Vietnam War, etc., we go into now into the theme of architecture. We are in a prosperous economy. In 1953, the first faculty of architecture is opened at the Universidad Central de Venezuela, which is like our mother. Before that, which is interesting, people who studied architecture either did it outside or graduated within the faculty of engineering. Out of so that's the beginning of architecture, and in the end of the 60s, in the Universidad Central de Venezuela, began a process called la renovation. It was like a preview of a socialist revolution in the academic day-to-day life. There was dismantling the traditional structure of the university. They were proposing no admission processes, etc., etc. It was a very complicated process. And out of that process, a group of professors of the university decided to take advantage of a university which was founded in paper a few years ago, which its name was University of Caracas, changed the name to University Simon Bolivar, moved it to the perimeter of the city, and that's that's relevant to what we are as a school of architecture, because we are in contrast. The founders of the university, all they did was in contrast to what the Universidad Central de Venezuela was. With its, I'm not making any judgment on that. It just was like that. The location, they look at the governance system. They did not use faculties. They had careers. Originally, most of them science and technology. They were in civil engineering, electrical engineering, electromechanical engineering, math, pure math, pure physics, etc. And they the only, and there was not even elected authorities. First year were decided by the central board. So in the small paradise of tranquility and contemplation. 2 years later, after the foundation, and I guess in order to balance the technological profile of the university, which reminds me of actually what it is MIT. We are like a little MIT, but outside the city. They decided to found architecture. And what they did is that they looked for a group of corner graduates, Venezuelan architects, graduated this. And with the advice of Mario Romagnach, which is a very talented Cuban architect who left Cuba at the end of the 50s, went to New York and taught for many years at the University of Pennsylvania. They devised a program of studies of architecture around design. There were 5 areas of studies, but it was a center on design. One of the things of the renovation process of the way it impacted on architecture is that those professors who taught design were seen as dinosaurs. There was no way they could do that. There was all work on diagrams of decisions. You cannot do any infrastructure building project. Architecture was in absolutely direct contrast. And there were 5 areas, and I think it should be coming now. And it was a 6 years study plan for a professional degree. One thing that it's important because it has influenced the way we degree issue professional licenses. Like you get your 007 license to kid architecture at the moment you receive your diploma from the president of the university. We were theory, construction management, and elective and general studies. There were 4 stages at the design studios. There was full emphasis on design studios, basic level where we talk about, and then you go into, let's say, 3-4 periods later, you go into more technical knowledge. You start considering structural themes, construction themes, management of topography, climate, etc. Then you went to a period called it was something rather new in the country. It was part of the contract. We were small, we were far away, and the idea of having people outside the basic core professor was to invite as many architects and professors from some other universities and even from outside the country. At the end, you have the degree. How did we focus on how you learn architecture? By application. started with these 4 things, and then you went into climate, you went into the city, you went into the urban. So it was a slow process until you get at the end for the degree. What were our basic themes? A lot of houses, we also have institutional buildings, urban facilities, but urban as large architecture, which is we were not into urban design as it is understood now, and a lot of projects of mass housing. Which were our references? I tried to organize our references for the Greeks, the mythology, the Titans, and our Titans were Mies, Corbusier, Kahn, and Wright. Was a higher goal, but it was not a Titan for some reason. We had Alvarado was a higher goal, and then we had lower gods against the Pangea and Portugal, and we had what we called at the time Levidians, which were those guys and those trends which were like so that was going into Archina or going into the Japanese metabolism was something of we were rebelling against the status quo of what we did. And this was usually, of course, from Wright. We all drove many times for the water. And Le Corbusier, just couldn't miss drawing Bill Savoy and the Berlin Museum. So no. And these were the main references that we all went through in our design studios and studies of history field. Of that time, we haven't had any, many pictures, but was something. Design studios where we had a collegiate format. We actually never had a single professor in the studio. We always had 2 or 3 guys. We were taught not to see our professor as a master, that you had to follow what he was telling you. You have the chance to interact. You have the chance to try to do your own thing. But that and there was something very particular. Our first project was a cube. We on basic design, on the first design, we did 3 projects. You did a cube, you did a vertical building, which was 3 stack cubes, and you did a horizontal building. There was like a desire that architecture was a problem of the space and how you move through space. It was not a problem of a shape or a form. So that's as you will see along the line, you will always see that very consistent architectural expression of all we do. These were our first thing. The other thing that just once, when we look back, is that was the influence of the country at the time. It was a prosperous economy, and the projects we did were huge, were airports, factories, we just, except for some occasion when we did a house and we did a student residence of 500 rooms, things like that. It was, everything was, optimistic, worth going into. These are, I found these pictures from Luis Emilio Pacheco's thesis projects on his group. On the left is Carlos Ferrer, and Silvana Perlisi, on the right is Emilio. So these were the degree projects, it were the thesis. It was always, supersized. So we went, why I closed this chapter in 1980, just I closed it because in 1980, the first wave of graduates from the university started returning. I returned Enrique Laveñaga, David Gouverner. We were like the 3 first guys who were kids in the blog. And also at the end of the 70s, when we graduated, our original founder, Alberto Toca, which I missed on the photo, dear person and an extremely talented artist. He left the dean of the school, the equivalent of the dean. So the school came into this second period where I call growing up, where we started to grow, we started to, still we had a country in an economic and prosperous development plan, but social unrest started to be more evident. We had the end of the 80s, we had what we called the Caracazo, which was a social riot. It lasted for 3 days and it had a tremendous political impact. Well, we had on the loyal Middle East going back and forth. We had in terms of so we had still had a prosperous democracy, but politically deteriorated. We had no party renewals. The parties who were the founders of democracy, the main parties, did not renew, became client parties oriented. They started colonizing every institutions. We could not aspire to be a dean of something or a president of the university if you somehow were not linked to that party. So on those terms, even though it was not a dramatic deterioration, began taking a toll on what we had Black Friday. And after a few years, left, took power in 1998. And the Democratic Party just crumbled. And the university, we were in the middle of those 20 years. Our university is a beautiful work, by the way. It's not paradise yet anymore. It began having strikes of employees, professors, students. So day-to-day life started changing, but still we had a planned study. We added art and landscape. We still had a very successful program of these two professors. We still have a 4-stage of design studios, but with variety, with diversity of professors, not only because we were returning, but we were highly people graduating in other universities from the country, which enriched what we were doing. With that, we lost some coherence on the way the design program was taught. The enrollment of students just kept increasing. I think we got to have about 300 students. We were still, though, a very small school of architecture. The Central University at that moment had, they were about 3,000 students. So we were like a very small, very tight, and very consistent. But what did we keep in terms of teaching? We kept that our fundamentals were space circulation, program, and site. That we did not start teaching design through abstract problems. Whatever we started designing, it always had a program, it always had a site. But through diversity, we started going into experimenting with materials, going deeper into the urban experience, understanding urban design as not as large architecture, doing furniture, doing pieces design, going into begin understanding that our world was, our city was half formal and half informal. We had a huge population living in popular sectors and what we call barriers that somehow we had to attend to. We still had as titans, well, besides of course, Le Corbusier and Nice, Weekend, and Villanueva. And in that period, well, which were our higher gods, and we had Alvaro Siza among others. we had Richard Meyer, and then we had Jesus Enredo, which one of our, let's say, most outstanding architects, and really profound person. And well, of course, Norman Foster, the Bank of Hong Kong, was, everybody wanted to do something like the Bank of Hong Kong with the students. And who were our villains at the time? Well, of course, Philip Johnson and Frank Gehry. What are they doing? We don't get it. But there was the framework in which we did our academic work, which was kept on studying Cannes and taking a look at this. We still taught the studios in a traditional way. But we started like the one on the drawing on the right is experience called Hamare on the east western part of the country, and it was a large development studio, I think, which lasted 2 or 3 periods doing work on that. The project started not growing in size but in complexity, and still we had our cube, our vertical, our horizontal, our basic design concepts, and as you see on the right, it was just a very straightforward form shaping based on comprehending the space. We have this beautiful work on the left. You see, obviously, and influence, and then you have this beautiful work on the right, and in the center is Franco Mitucci's design, obviously very much in the spirit of the Susan trade. So at the end of this period, where we grew, where we enlarged as a school, where we diversified, we come to the third chapter, 1998. We said, well, came the revolution, and how did it affect us? We started taking. It was like a mixed affection. It was a regime based on charisma and authoritarian vision of power, led by Hugo Chavez, which did a successful coup in 19. But finally, he just was pardoned, and went to electoral system and won the presidency with a large support of poor population and of some of the elites. People think that Chavez was elected only with the support of the poor people. No, it was actually a lot of the elites saw him as an alternative. So he changed the constitution 2 years later, and we, from an imperfect democracy, we went to an unproductive socialism. But in those few years, a lot of people in the academia, so not because I believed in what the revolution did, but because I believed there was a country was being shaken, was being shattered. So people went into more experimental experiences, were deeply into studying the informal sector of the city, went into trying to understand the influences of the environment and architecture. So these new waves of graduates started working, say, the first part of this period with great creativity and enthusiasm. We, after being a country of receiving migrants from all Latin America, apart from, say, for example, from Colombia, because of economic problems, we received huge, large migration from Argentina when they had the dictatorships. But then we started having people living in the country. They saw what it was heading. They decided to leave. And with that, we started having professors live in the school and live in the country. And we started having good students who thought of coming to the Simon Bolivar as their finale of his academic life, started going somewhere else. And but still during those years, these pictures are not perhaps exactly, I don't remember what year it was, but we still have, a beautiful career, beautiful setting for design studios. Our building on the left is called Warehouse 5 because this is really a warehouse. It was a temporary warehouse built when beginning of the university. We have a wonderful group of students, very able, very capable, hard working as any good student you can find. We still learn by aggregation, but we started showing, as you will see later on, deterioration of infrastructure, problem of mobility and security. Changes on the stages. We try to separate what we call the degree project, and not seeing it as a kind of a final exam to obtain the professional license, but as an academic and intellectual experience. So we try to have a final project that obtain as final project design experience. Besides basic relation and program, those had to be seen in relation to the city and in relation to the social experience. There was much more community involvement and a much larger urban experience. Our references still, and people have, we still have the four titans. Someone tells me they have a different titan. We still, I don't know, me, but I still talk about Cold War. When you see the works, it's still here. Then we start having Alejandro Arena, the Chilean Pritzker awarded architect. We started having seeing more in depth Rogelio Salmona and the great number of Colombian architects, especially the guys who did a beautiful work at Medellin. But we call Renzo Piano, we have Kengo Puma, and perhaps as billions, or if they are my billions, Zaha Hadid and Daniel Libensky. And those has been a reference in history. Yes, and from that we still we were doing the work throughout these 20 years. We did experiments on building on our own, say, the structure on the left, then doing furniture, doing small sculptures, and it's this ambiance is one of Brady Franco's like this picture, and so it's in this part of the campus we still retain that desire of the founders of the university as a small paradise. We have our studios, we have our collective design finals. We have every
Hi, everyone. I believe our speaker froze, so just give us a couple moments and wait until his internet has better connectivity. We really appreciate your patience, and we will bring the program right back momentarily. Thank you.
okay. I'm back, Amy, as I told you. Yeah, let me go back. Just I told Amy that she didn't have to worry if this happened because this is happens to us in every design studio session nowadays. We had a wonderful facilities. When the School of Architecture at the Bolivar was founded, there was a by design each one of us had a studio, not only design, but all the other courses. We actually stayed at the university. People slept at the studio. It was trying to resembling what these Korean graduates had on the experience and what was usual in the States. With the years, however, due to insecurity, this was a temporary place. The end just became a place for having the studios. That and the design of the university, which the different everything was spread around the university, did not help. Did not help. I'm trying to change. Okay, but we had this desire to work all this period of the revolution. We kept on producing some very nice and beautiful works of all sizes in small communities, large buildings. The first three projects, the cube, the horizontal, and the vertical, were no longer taught as a separate projects. Were part of an urban space. So, and that may be, why it makes such an emphasis, because for 50 years we have been somehow teaching the same course with different formats and different emphasis. But that has given us a lot of coherence. There's a beautiful work by Cesar Barbaran. I think again, this was the things we were producing in this 2 decades, 2000 to 2020. We started doing when we started doing urban works and not seeing urban design as large architecture, but as something involved with city, how the city's processes were derived. We started taking a close look at the climate, environment, renewable energies. Urban design became a topic well taught by. We have a very nice group of professors teaching. And then we started using extensively digital tools. Students began having quite a good handling of that. So this is what we were producing those years. We got into some beautiful experiences. We began having the exchange programs with universities all around the world, in Europe, mostly in Europe and Latin America. There were design experiences, say this one in Galapagos. So even though the political situation, the economic situation of the country, there was a lot of mystic and design to things. We got into different topics. There's a studio I taught with Miguel Carpio. We called it Shape of Water, like the movie, because buildings had to do in a popular sector called the Charneca, in the middle of a barrio. They had to do facilities building and doing the building, how to manage water, how to grow plants and with it those buildings. Then we go to the last chapter, we finish it soon, in which as of today and what been after years of struggle, after second part of the last period from Chavez to Maduro, where change was from charisma to repression. And it had several periods of extreme, let's say, demonstration, 2014, 2017. We had huge marches like the one on the left. But beginning this last chapter, we have a demobilized society. We still have a group of people absolutely convinced that you have to do something. But in general, it's a country. So pandemic, what just for us was one more thing. Oops, and now we have pandemic. Okay, wow, what's next? So, and how did pandemic affect us learning? Well, the infrastructure of the university just collapsed. economy collapsed. We had an 80% reduction of gross domestic product. That if you join that with a very pervasive policy of the regime to have control of the autonomous university, and by just denying them resources to operate, then you have the beautiful enthusiast work. You have classrooms, the studios, beautiful pictures you saw. Then you started having the falling. We actually just as I told you, the pandemic was one of the things we had been teaching 6 months without light. So there was a picture, and we would find which was a beautiful picture of a group of students having a creek with their cell phones with the light sun. So, but that's what we find. But at the same time, we decided that we're going to be to keep on teaching, and actually architecture of the careers of the Simon Bolivar University by thanks to Franco and Alice and their will to continue the university and say, okay, let's move digital, let's move teaching digital. We started doing experiences, and why don't we just pick up of a large amount of Venezuelan graduates were living abroad and doing beautiful experiences. This is a project, a studio I did with Ignacio Cardona. It's based on what he was doing for his PhD thesis in Harvard. It was an integration of a cultural complex in one of the largest barrios in Caracas. And this is another intervention in the city speaking about connectivity from the Pica Rivera. And we've been producing since the pandemic. We're still producing these works. But now in a different format. We just have to interact through Zoom. I think we all hate Zoom, but that's what we have. Actually, we just have to thank. We had an experience in August with 23 graduates who bought us the Zoom sessions for the whole year. They did it again, and I will always thank them for them. And they joined us on the design on the studio presentations. So, and this is what we've been doing. Different studios, different people. We, of course, is helping the students when they do, a wonderful work. So, well, we have to do that on the screen, and which is this is from Cesar too. And then we have Franco, we have the students, and out of this experience, so we're learning to draw again with the mouse. I think so, and I think this is either Franco and me just drawing, and both of us on the screen, and this being on the digital, we just we right from the 50-year anniversary, and we still have a 5-year plan study. We would like to get rid of the, not being so, at least me, not being so influenced by having the academic degree as a professional license. We'd love to have people graduate as architect and then presenting a professional exam. So we are in the middle of virtual education, and but at the end of my talk, what I wanted to talk on one hand to my friends at Metalca, who are here, just like a very brief view of what has been my story of teaching architecture for 50 years, and when getting to our 50th anniversary, just my thoughts is that of course we have to celebrate. Which is that we all who have been teaching, all who studied, all who were related somehow to the university, you have to be extremely proud of what students have accomplished, what professors have done in various circumstances, with resources, without resources. But then right now, besides celebrating as good Venezuelans we know how to do, well, I think this is an opportunity to think, are we getting into virtual education? As I said in in a talk organized by MIT Club of Washington, Nicolas show about 3 years ago. No, another guy said, for us, at least I see that way, going into virtual education is not an option for us, it's a necessity. I mean, we cannot even have the students arriving to the university with others. There's a huge deficit of public transportation. There's no way you can hire a new professor, a young professor, telling that he has to drive to university 3 times a week or 4 times a week to teach, when his salary doesn't even cost because of gasoline of going 1 week to university. So going into virtual education, it's a necessity. And the optimum for me would be to have a mix of present, of being in the site, not ever losing that hugging each other and talking to each other. But we have to go on. And if that is so, what are the options we have for digital teaching? What we've been doing since August. Actually, we've been teaching design studios the way we did, but by television. And well, we've been doing our best effort, but there gotta be something else. My interest in connecting to MIT was, okay, what are you guys doing? Was nice. Nicolas Monchot talked to month ago that you guys at MIT, you just don't want to go back to virtual. They said, well, that's something you learn. What are the experiences out there? Should we go into a more open learning process? Should we be designing a study program only for designers? Should we go into a more flexible curriculum design? How do we use the infrastructure we have? We go back to the studio. Why is it not a more interactive place? Why don't you get all the different areas of the study program and mix them absolutely in one digital environment and having the instructor teachers participating or designing studios. I'm doing it right now with Nicolas Ladropoulos. We're doing a beautiful design, and Nicolas is in Madrid. He just finished work at 7 p.m. and goes to his home and connects to the internet, and he is with me on the studio. And so being in what I call virtual education is offering us an opportunity to connect, to draw from many sources. The thing that I think is worth to do in this celebration of our 50 years is why don't we talk in depth about this? Why don't we discuss it? So that's why at the end we call it just called for discussions. What are our next? Thanks to virtual world, we can really think about a master of urban and landscape. There are 3 masters that are in mind: master of urban landscape design, master of architectural design and arts, master of architecture and theater. So we are full of plans. We're full of ideas, and let's. I hope you have any questions. I hope you haven't been bored by me. But this is what I think we should be discussing in the next month. Thanks again to Tarpa for allowing me to do the talk. Thanks to Manuel Barrios, to Ignacio Cardona, to Luis Emilio Pacheco, to giving me comments on what I was planning to do on the talk. And thanks to Franco and Alice. I hope you give us a few words after I finish. So thanks you all, and we are open for questions, comments, and whatever format you wish. So let me go back to the larger screen, and let me go back to see all your faces. Many good friends. Hola Eduardo. Hola Carlos. There are many good friends. So if you want to say hola Ignacio, so you finally came. So anyway, I did talk too much already. Well, even my conservators here, everybody. So I'll open up the mics if you wish, or if you want to. Feel free to raise your hands, and Lizzie and Amy will give you the mic. Let's say something, Franco.
I think there is a question on the chat by Ignacio.
Okay,
I don't know if you want to answer that, Guillermo.
wait. Let me try. You know that I go slowly on this. No, just let me see. The thing of the chat is as well. Let me go back. Ignacio.
Yeah, Ignacio is saying that architecture was probably the most demanded program at the university, at Universidad Simon Bolivar, for several years, and it still is, even though it's not at its best moment. So he's asking if, in your opinion, how the political crisis had an influence on the need to study architecture. Is architecture a tool to face political crisis?
Well, I don't know if a tool. Maybe it's escape. This is a beautiful escape. You just it's a beautiful environment. What you're doing, I mean, just as I tell everybody in the office, you spend, the week. I told anyone, I think last night, you spend your day at the office solving problems. Having your client, so finally Sunday morning, you get up and you design. So it's that's what one still likes, and studying architecture is a beautiful part. On the other hand, architecture still is in Venezuela is a way to do some other art-related careers, and I give you a background. So many of us, of our graduates, have gone into theater. Many, like Angel Sanchez, went into fashion design. There are plenty of them who have gone successfully, tremendously successfully. So it is an option. That's why at the end I talk about having that to be considered being even more open to that which happens spontaneously. Should we look forward to it? Should we perhaps think seriously about doing that? But of course, the political situation. What I think in actual political situation, there was a few things that I wrote on the notes that I sent you. So I had in the chapter 4 that resilience, what we call resilience for us, became a way of life. Again, it's not an option, but we have to do that. That resiliency just perhaps is what made us still doing teaching and watching yesterday morning with Maria Gabriela a thesis, a beautiful thesis about a penitentiary building. But I'm gonna be Sandra. When I'm more motivated nowadays teaching than I was 20 years ago, and somehow that has something to do with politics. And politics have influenced what we've been doing at the studio. And the first chapter I talked about, the way we were founded, the program was designed with an absolute contrast to what was happening to the Central University at that moment. So to understand the same way that to understand design, you have to understand the city, you have to understand the political environment. To understand what we've been teaching, you have to understand the different political situations our country have been going through. So Drew's iPad 21 built or unbuilt projects. No, these were unbuilt projects. Actually, were students' projects. So what I showed today was the design proposal of the students. Have we graduated 1,700 architects? Franco, since that? Wow.
I think Ken wants to ask something, Guillermo.
Who?
Hi. My name's Kim.
Okay.
My name's Guillermo. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's really interesting to me. I was first in Caracas when I was 11 years old with my father, who was an MIT architecture graduate from the class of 1911. I graduated in 1965. But we were in 1952 in Caracas at that moment of great hope although I believe still under an earlier dictatorship. The thing that I wanted to ask, to tie your presentation into MIT and into social movements, one of the people I knew who was teaching at MIT was Lisa Peedy, who worked on the plans for Ciudad Guayana back in the 1960s. And that was a social movement, a effort to listen to the local people and so forth in a way that seems different from the traditional architecture education that you described early on at Simon Bolivar. And so I'm wondering, because now it seems to me you are finding a new imperative, but also way of communicating or finding the connection to people that maybe is quite different from Lisa's work in Ciudad Guayana, or maybe has some similarities. Can you tie a little bit of that all together?
Well, what Lisa did at that time, Lisa Peedy, I had the fortune to take her course when I went to my M.Arch.AS course.
Really?
Was that we had a huge community, you know, that we didn't care about. We knew it existed, but we had no connection with their lives. And hers was, at least for one of the first major, you know, like calls. Hey guys, you have this happening. These people living next to you. And what I'm happy about is that lately we have been getting some beautiful work. Ignacio's work, what I did with him in the studio, Ignacio Cardona, now he's teaching at Wormwood. He just finished his PhD. He's been on the barrio of Petare for many years within the studio. Elisa Silva, right now, she's taught at the university many patients during the last 20 years. Elisa Silva did a beautiful modeling of the stairs of the barrios in La Palomera, and it was actually I was listening to her in a radio interview yesterday, and she talked that well, she knew Rafael Moneo. Rafael Moneo got her León de Venecia his award to say, somebody asked him, why should we see a Divinal? And he said, go to the Venezuelan pavilion and see the work. So yes, there is a conscience, but it has come to us by force. It's so evident. It's so evident that you could no longer just. But at the moment, we had a country that was developing fast, but not all of it. It was a gap. At the end, the saddest thing of this last 20-year revolution period is that more than ever, there is inequality. I was listening to economists 5 days ago. The 10% richer of the population is statistically is twice as rich as last year, and the other 90% is twice as poor as last year. So these are our numbers. So when you have that kind of numbers, you have to go into those sectors. But what I think we've been successful is that, I mean, the teachers who do that more regularly. Yeah, I'm still like the old school. I like to do huge buildings. But I get into that. Once in a while we do it. Now I did an experience in Gramaway. Remember Franco with Rafael Marciano? I once did that. And I forgot what I was saying. Happens to me in class every week. Nicolas, could you remind me what I was saying? So no, but nowadays it's an imperative. You have to do a mix. But the nice thing we've done going into working in these areas is with a view on design. We have to do beautiful design. So what happened in the 60s and the 70s when people talk about going to the barrios was that you could not design. Design was not, well seen. It was a scene. Now it's a more open and flexible. You have to do a beautiful work wherever you are. And right now, we at these studios, we talk more about the process. So right now, the studio with Nicolas, most how you mix things together. Each one of the students so design, for example, when you mix in context, social conditions, climate, structure, architecture. The architect education is how you mix all things. It's a very hard, requires a lot of hard work, but it's a very rewarding. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to listen to you, and your way of describing the titans, the higher gods, the lower gods, and the villains was a good way of seeing the progression over the years and what remained and what changed. I appreciated that very much. Thank you again for the lecture.
Yeah, that's an idea from Manuel Barrios when I was doing the references.
That's great.
Hola, David.
Hola, Frontado. Excellent. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. And more than a question, I just wanted to mention something that, I was part of the first graduating group with Larrañaga, with Frontado, with Grau, so many others. And we were these 3 musketeers that graduated in Ivy League schools and were invited from commencement immediately to join the faculty, which was very unusual. They just passed the torch, and that was very generous and very visionary of our founding professors. And that's what created this, I think, this change of diversity. We were very critical, by the way, and maybe we were the most outspoken and critical of the wonderful education that we were receiving. And our faculty said, this is the type of people that we need to challenge, to diversify, to question. And I remember that when we studied, we felt very frustrated that we knew that half of our population lived in barrios, in the informal settlements, and not one project in 5 years of studios, 3 semesters, but per year had to do with the barrios. And now, for instance, only a year ago, thanks to Alice and thanks to Franco, we held a joint studio between my students at the University of Pennsylvania, 20 of them, 35 at Universidad Simon Bolivar, and 35 in Guadalajara. And we were dealing simultaneously with barrios in Guadalajara, in Caracas, and in Bogota. And guess what? Of this online education, this experiment, and so difficult, the students that were more productive, more engaged, went into more depth, had an amazing domain of the English language, the narrative, the graphics, and on top of it, with the Venezuelan simpatia, okay, and gratitude with the students of Universidad Simon Bolivar. So this evolution, this description of what you made, I mean, it almost brings tears to my eyes. I just have to feel very proud and I'm grateful of our founding professors and how the torch has been passed to these generations. So keep on doing it. Amazing.
Nice to see you. There's a question I have from Erimar. 2 questions, both related to the Bolivarian Revolution. First, did the social changes result in an increased focus on the vernacular, on informal settlements and building system? Yes, definitely yes. Second, did ALBA result in an increase in interchange with other Latin American countries and students? Not really, not at all. Just perhaps the people who's related to the government. So, I don't know, Franco, if you can.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that almost 10 years ago, we actually went through a process of accreditation between countries from the ALBA community, basically Colombia, Chile, Peru, and Ecuador. So we are, and also Brazil and Uruguay. So we actually integrated our programs between the countries in South America. It was an unusual situation that also helped the process of accreditation of the diplomas in different countries eventually. Okay, I just wanted to mention that. It's a small detail.
Well, any other questions? I think it's Franco has another meeting right now, 6:30. So,
But there's some other questions, Guillermo, on the chat.
I
There's
told
some other
you.
questions for you in the chat.
Alice, resilience, Philip Ewing. Is that Philip Ewing? Okay. Have you noticed any repeated themes in how the transition to a virtual education format impacted which features students tend to zoom in or in the project, as well as how reviewers respond to them? Although it would not be surprising if public health issues took more from role in project reviews. Have there been widespread changes in the qualitative characteristics of the spaces in projects? That's an extremely good question, because let's say I'm a model man. For me, it's hard to appreciate a space on the virtual environment. So I would have to see these things built. Well, perhaps you should ask that question to Franco, might be Alice, who have taught lower courses, and since we started on virtual education, like this Franco, always the oldest guys, they send them to design 10 to the last chapter. The students, they're really fed up, and they don't want to see an old guy when they're doing design 1 or 2. It's like, the elders of the tribe go to the last semester, but perhaps they can offer. My experience has been that teaching virtual studios to students above design tribe over the middle of the career, I think it's feasible, because the student has the tools, has the abilities, and you can relate to them, and you can actually see if he's understanding what it means, and you can predict it better. But I've been terrified about going to teach design 1 or 2, which was actually what I taught all of my life. I love doing the first 3 designs when I was teaching. That's what I really liked. But in virtual education, I feel more comfortable teaching the last designs, because I can relate better to the students. But I don't know that I can't answer that question. I don't know if Alice or Franco or Ignacio, who's been teaching on Wentworth and virtually, can answer that question. It's a very good question. It's one of the questions, one of the big.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed it, and although I'm not working in architecture professionally right now, I still advise at Auburn University, and often on the interior architecture reviews. And I've noticed that there's, I mean, at least from the professors, tend to push or have specifically selected projects where, issues around public health might come into, in the workplace, might come into more to the forefront. But it's sort of an interesting time, and it's interesting to see how it is happening at USB. And thank you again for your lecture. It's really fascinating.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much to everyone that attended. And Jose, that was a very wonderful share. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Emily.
I think if, in the spirit of time, we if there's no other pressing questions, should we end our lecture today?
Okay with me. I just want to say hi to many good friends I have here.
Okay, I think you should stay on and absolutely continue your connections. And I just want to say thanks to everyone who participated, and really hope you support this endeavor. We're trying very hard to reconnect all the people that matter to us. So let's keep this up, please, because I know that that's one of Professor Frontado's biggest missions for joining Mitarca, is to put his architecture values in the forefront. And so all of you that are here, I know you care very much about this topic as well. So please connect with us, join us. We love to have you be part of the community.
Emily, this is Mina. Thank you very much to Jose Guillermo. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And seeing my old classmates from Harvard, David Gouverneur and Oscar Grauer, was extra gratification. I wanted to mention to everyone that I think we are recording this session, and the images and the talk was really good. And because the audio was a little bit on and off, I think that, Emily, can you tell us where the lecture will be posted?
Yes, I will make sure that we post a lecture or at least the information on the newsletter, the next newsletter, so that any of you that are interested, sign up with us if you haven't, and so that we can keep you informed.
Yes, and because we were also the MIT Club of Washington, DC was also supporting this, we will also post it on our website for the presentation. I think the theme of educating architects internationally, educating architects worldwide is ever more important. And especially now that because of climate change and politics, we realize we're all so related to one another. So thank you, Jose Guillermo, for launching this, and we will continue and give us ideas, our dear audience, of any other themes that you want to pursue. But the theme of educating architects, I think, has great resonance right now, especially because we realize how much the man-made environment impacts the world we live in, from the natural disasters that we are having to all kinds of issues that we have on a daily basis in our news. So architects matter, and the discussions we have here have ramifications beyond our profession. So I hope that we will continue this discussion. Jose, I really, truly admire the presentation that you had, showing how much your heart and soul is into educating people. Thank you.